What's up guys, and welcome back to On The Brick with another custom LEGO review. See, this video is partly sponsored by Webricks. They reached out to me again a few months ago asking if I would like to do another collaboration and offered to send me any of the pieces for a set of my choice for free. I sent them the part list to a few different sets and gave them the option, and this is the one that they agreed to. However, if you have ever used Webrick, then you know that they don't always have all the pieces available. That's okay though, because they did provide me with the part list for all the missing pieces, which I then purchased on Bricklink. So this version of Din Djarin's Naboo N1 Starfighter is about a 50-50 mix, to be completely honest with you. While Webrick definitely provided more pieces than that, after looking over the instructions, I realized that some of the more fragile areas should probably have been built using real LEGO, so I just got those as well. Now really quick, before we get into the full review, I just want to remind you that we are inching closer to 7,000 subscribers, and once we get there, I will be giving away this brand new Thrawn minifigure from Minifig Co. This is completely brand new. It'll come with both heads. It's a 360-degree pad printed minifigure. So if you want a chance to win this, then make sure you hit that subscribe button. This version of the N1 Starfighter, flown by Din Djarin, was first seen in the Book of Boba Fett, and then much more prominently in Mandalorian Season 3. And this recreation in LEGO form was designed by a brickvault regular, David Buckles, which is kind of surprising to be honest, but yet also now makes perfect sense. This build is minifig scale as well. It comes in at 13 inches long, about 8 inches wide, and 3 inches tall. And of course, you can fit 2 minifigures inside of it. There's room for a minifigure in the cockpit, and then for Baby Yoda / Grogu in the back here. There is also an alternative build to this where you can put an astromech instead, but I preferred this version. There is of course a separate part list for a stand, which I was under the impression would be included with the offer, but I didn't get it, so sorry, unfortunately no stand today. Though just like with the last 2 times that I reviewed a Naboo N1 Starfighter from brickvault, I would highly recommend getting it. Not only will it support the ship much better than just sitting it on the floor or stand or shelf or whatever you have it on, but it also makes it look cooler. So without the stand though, this mock comes in at 623 pieces, which are used expertly. Having built both of brickvault's other Naboo N1 Starfighters, their first original one, which was just absolutely terrible, and then the severely, significantly much improved second version, I could immediately tell that this took heavy influence from those builds. But I would not feel comfortable saying any more than inspiration, as there are still pretty significant changes throughout. This is not just a color swapped version. Just like the actual ship in universe, this LEGO version is pretty much a full rebuild from the ground up. There are similar techniques used and similar design choices made, and for reasons that I will get into shortly, there's also definitely a touch of David throughout this model. This build uses the snot technique quite heavily on pretty much everywhere but the wings themselves. For those of you who don't know, snot stands for studs not on top. It does not mean studs on their side or I just built this thing sideways. That's not snot. In my opinion, the snot technique is meant to be a more creative way of building. Some people don't like it as it takes away the LEGO aspect, and that opinion comes in because with the studs not on top, you usually get pretty smooth surfaces. However, for a model like the N1 Starfighter, which is meant to be a sleek looking starfighter, it's a perfect technique to use. I have no doubt that if LEGO made wedge tiles, those would be used on the wings instead. Not that the studs look bad, but keep in mind that these builds and models are usually designed with the intention of screen accuracy. For instance, one of my favorite details on this model are the 3 orbs or 3 circles inside of the cockpit, meant to show the console that Din Djarin has. It's a minor detail, but it still is really cool to have. And the rest of the cockpit itself is equally pretty fleshed out, at least what they could get in a model this size, and looking at this does really make me wonder how in the world Grogu gets back there. Now this one piece is only held on by gravity, so you don't really want to be moving it around too much, but again, you can fit Grogu in there if you want. But overall, I just seriously love the details all throughout this. There's nothing really to point out here like bigger models have. A lot of it is just like the smaller choices that they made to break up the flow of things, like the use of the tiles on the left side of the vehicle here, or the entire back tail section where they have binoculars with bars fixed into them. I think that's really cool. Also, let's not forget that the booster engine is also included in this model as well. But speaking of the engines, I do need to point out the single biggest downside to this model, and that is, without a doubt, the engines. Way back when I built the very first version of the N1 Starfighter from brickvault, it was just a disaster class, pretty unable to hold itself together. However, when I built this model, the main part of the body, the tail, and the wings themselves were all perfectly fine. There's some finicky aspects there, but for the most part, it was okay. I never felt like this thing was gonna fall apart in my hands, and it never did. And throughout the entire process, I really thought that this would be a 10 out of 10 perfect build. But that very quickly changed when I started working on this engine. Because this is not just an N1 Starfighter in gray, this engine is a completely different build. Obviously, it's more open, more exposed, and just looking at this, you can probably tell that some of the pieces used aren't the best when it comes to stability. There is an amazing technique used here that I had never seen before, and I really can't wait to see how else it's used. And at first I was super excited for it, but then I very quickly came to dislike it, as it's not very stable, and the further that I got into this build and the engine, the more unstable it became, and it did fall apart on me multiple times. I also think that it doesn't help how the instructions here aren't entirely clear at points, or really finished. For instance, this section right here leaves the final product looking different than how it's actually supposed to. This is supposed to be fully rounded off, but the instructions don't show you that. The final product of the engine is extremely cool looking, but yeah, I definitely got frustrated more than once having to put it together, especially as you get near the end of the engine. But in a very weird contrast, I had zero issues with the other engine at all. Like, absolutely at all. Just built it first try, no issues at all, everything was fine. I can't tell you what the difference was. I used a mix of both pieces throughout both of them, and the only thing I can think of is that both engines aren't actually identical. There are minor differences, but I really just don't know. And then the only other issue that I had, well, actually happened while filming this. One of the engines just popped off. That's because they're only connected in 2 places, and it's not the most secure connection, but it does work. In fact, it's such a non-problem that I decided to film me putting the engine back on to show you just how easy it really is. Yeah, that's it. You just slide it into place and there you go. So what was that touch of David I was talking about earlier? Well, it was the instability. I don't know why, but pretty much in every single build of his, there is a little bit of a lack of stability in things, but it usually comes with the payoff of having a cooler looking vehicle in the end. So honestly, it's not that bad. If you want to get this with real Lego, you're looking at about $150, plus about $14 for the instructions. And overall, I think that's definitely worth it, especially if you're a fan of The Mandalorian. Outside of a few minor issues, the instructions are perfectly fine, and a good 90% of the build is great. Just take the engines with a little bit of patience. So overall, I would give this thing about a 7.5 out of 10, mainly because that one engine really did irk me. So yeah, with that, I would love to know your comments in the dots down below. I'm going to keep that. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button as well to help support this channel, and consider supporting me on Instagram, Discord, and of course on Patreon, where I need to send out a huge thank you to all my patrons, including Shiny Mimikyu. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.